Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this evening for Natural Transcendence in conversation with Antonia Wright, Anastasia, Samoylova, and Colleen Plum, moderated by the curator of the exhibition, Rhonda Mitrani. My name is Danielle Bender, and I'm the Cinematic Arts Manager at Oolite Arts. I'd like to start tonight's program with the land acknowledgement. Oolite Arts acknowledges the Seminole and Miccosukee peoples as the current and ancestral keepers of the land we work on, and their connection to land and community. We pay our respect to the Miccosukee and Seminole tribes and to the elders, both past and present, including the Tequesta and Calusa tribes. Natural Transcendence is a group show at our space off Lincoln Road, which featured works that reflect on an ethereal sensibility towards nature. And normally for this program, we would be welcoming you to our actual building, but we're obviously grateful to have you here virtually tonight. Tonight, we'll have the curator, Rhonda Mitrani, speaking with several of the artists that participated in the show. And as a brief reminder, please drop any questions you have in the chat and we'll be answering them towards the end of the conversation. A little bit of background on tonight's guest. Antonia Wright is a Cuban-American artist born in Miami, Florida. Through video, performance, photography, and sculpture, she responds to the extremes of emotion, control, and violence as it relates to systems of power in society. Anastasia Samoylova is a Russian-American artist who moves between observational photography, studio practice, and installation. By utilizing strategies related to digital media and commercial photography, her work explores notions of environmentalism, consumerism, and the picturesque. Colleen Plum makes photographs, videos, and installations investigating contradictory relationships humans have with non-human animals. Plum's recent works reflect on the interconnectedness of ecological systems, forests, oceans, air, linked with photographs of her two daughters as they engage in the landscape made over the past 20 years. And last but not least, Rhonda Mitrani is the curator of Natural Transcendence. She opened the screening room to curate and cultivate a new media exhibition and project space in Miami. The space is dedicated to motion picture, which includes video art exhibitions, film workshops and lectures, screenings, and space for filmmakers to work. She's currently writing a feature and developing a new center for film, video, and photography with her sister, Dina Mitrani. Rhonda, do you want to join me? Should be here any second.
Hello.
Thank
you so much for the warm intro, Danielle. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Oolite. Thank you to Dennis Scholl and Amanda Bradley and Danielle and the rest of the Oolite team for inviting me to guest curate this exhibition. If you work in the arts, you know how tricky it can be to assemble all of the art hardware in a video exhibition, and of course, align all the video on the wall to the exact frame. So working with Oolite as curator was such a great experience, and I'm honored and super excited that the show has been extended now through November 7th. So thank you. When Dennis called and asked me to do this, I was both excited and nervous because we were all processing the social dilemmas of the pandemic and masking up while working and managing our families. But this proposal evolved into a bright light of possibility. And I can't deny that the quiet space during the pandemic was the experience that led to the show, the theme of the show. During a walk in the park just after lockdown, I was able to immerse myself in nature, feeling a gust of wind, and the realities of the dangers of COVID was setting in, and being enveloped by the trees and feeling immersed by nature away from the toxicity of this virus. And I felt safe and in nature's embrace. And that ultimately was the inspiration for the theme of this show. In this exhibition, I didn't want to address work that was being made during the pandemic specifically. We had all seen so much of that, but just work that brought us closer to nature. Work that serves nature and reminds us of her fragility while we ourselves were in a vulnerable state. For this show, each artist and their work speaks to the theme of natural transcendence, but their own personal journeys make their work inspiring and unique. I feel I have to acknowledge the other artists in this exhibition: Wendy Wisher, who I've worked with before at the screening room, Jennifer Steinkamp, and her incredible dervish tree, Tyler Guerrier, and how his work echoes the rest of the world's desire to be in nature in their own yard. Megan McClarney and her complex video installation and her meditation on river. All of his works together really created a very unique exhibition. But tonight I get to introduce to you Antonia Wright, Colleen Plum, Anastasia Samoylova, and their work. And I didn't plan this. If you guys can all come on screen. I think you guys are coming on now. I didn't plan this, but all of their work in their show originally started as photographs. And there's so much to share tonight, but I mean, the icebreaker is that I believe I just found out that Anastasia and Colleen know of each other because Anastasia lived in Chicago for a time. Is that right? I think we have Anastasia here. There you are.
Hi, yes, in the area. I'm not sure if we met, but I know of Colleen's work since that time.
Right.
So I just wanted to ask you with this question. I just mentioned your works were originally photographs. So I wanted to ask you how you decided to choose which images, to choose for the theme of the show and for this exhibition, especially since you already work in connection to nature. You have so much to choose from, right? And then there's format, right? So I'd like for you each to talk about the process you went through to exhibit them through light. So maybe we could begin with, and thank you. Here's Megan McClarney's work. Maybe we could start with Colleen. I know you and I, when we first spoke, talked about which images to choose, and we went through so many. Maybe you can share with us a little bit your process.
Sure. Thank you, Rhonda. It's really an honor to be in this show, and I'm in Chicago, and I wish I could see it live in Miami. But these installation pictures do tell the story of what a unique show it is. So we went through. I had these tree photographs that we kept talking about, and I was sending you, what about this one? And, there's a lot of sort of irony or displacement in those pictures. And then I, at the last minute, shared with you these photographs that I've been taking, which I've never exhibited before, that I've been building this series of photographing my daughters. My older daughter is 19 now. So, almost 20 years photographing them in what usually is in the landscape or at moments. I was thinking about this before, when I'm most interested in photographing them is usually aligned with what my other work is, which is about connection, or how humans connect with nature or the landscape, or, largely it's been looking at animals. But when I photograph, when we were looking at this series, I thought, why don't I really take these pictures seriously? And they've kind of been on a back burner, I guess, with this idea. And this exhibition, pushed me to write about this work and to really take it seriously, that what's up with that sort of urge to connect. And if I'm documenting it, it's usually because I'm so interested in what's happening there. Why is Elsa lying down in the grass? Why are they all standing in the lake? And it's like what you described with the start of the show. It's sort of a moment of grace or something larger than, just our small humanness. I think to try to capture that in a photograph is difficult, but maybe that's the inspiration.
I want to take it back a little further. I mean, let's continue. I want to go to Antonia. I'm so excited to share about the history of all of your work too. Antonia, how about you? How did you go about choosing your work? And I'm going to interrupt you. Just full disclosure, I'm going to interrupt and say there's the work of Colleen and there's the work of Antonia and Anastasia, because we're on a loop. And I'd really love everyone who is sitting in on this talk, and thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it, to see the work that each artist is referencing to, since we're on a loop. So I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Antonia.
Oh, hi. Well, first, just Rhonda, thank you so much for including me in this incredible show. And thank you to Oolite. It's been such a great experience, and the show is so timely. And also to Danielle and Amanda, thank you. You've been great to work with. So in arriving at the work, I mean, we talked about a lot of different projects, and then we kept coming back to these cyanotypes. So I have 2 large-scale photographs in the show. They're cyanotypes. Cyan means blue, deep blue impression in Greek. And it was really first started by Anna Atkins, and some say she was the first female photographer. She was also a botanist, so she would go on nature walks and she would collect the different plants she found in algae, and then she would lay them on the page, and then she would take photographs of them. And that was her way of documenting her research. And when I first found out about her, I really kind of became in love with her. I mean, she created the first photo book. Henry Foxtrot Talbot gets all the credit, but she self-published hers. That's another conversation. But yeah, so I was working with these plants. It was, you know, the height of the pandemic, and I would go on these nature walks and collect vegetation from my neighborhood. And then I turned part of my studio into a dark room, and I would mix the chemistry to create the cyanotypes. You mix 2 chemicals together, and then I would paint it on these large spools of paper that I would cut. And once it was dried, I would roll it up and go outside and lay it out very quickly. The second it starts hitting the sun, the exposure begins. So then I would arrange my composition, and then I would lay my body on top, and I wouldn't move for 8 minutes. So it's a photogram, which is a non-negative photo, which you can make a photograph using, you know, film in the darkroom, but you can also use the sun for your exposure. And then I would clear away all of everything really quickly, run inside, rinse it off, and then it would be archival, which means it would last for 100 years. So my work is usually involving very much my body. For about 15 years, I've been making very physical body-based performances. I've done projects where, you know, I throw myself through sheets of glass live. I've covered myself in bees. I've walked on and fallen on a frozen lake. So when I knew I wanted to work with this medium of the cyanotype, I wanted to incorporate Anna Atkins's sort of lineage and history, but then also combine the way that I work. So I think of each performance, each photograph is a performance on the page. And, you know, this was also a time where we were so isolated, and the series is called Touch Has a Memory. So it was sort of a way a way to kind of really physically touch, you know, and connect. And I think it almost looks like you're trying to connect with the viewer. So then when Rhonda told me that all the works in the show were light-based, she knew she needed to block out the windows, and then came up with this great idea to upscale the photographs. So we digitized all the photographs, and then we printed them on vinyl to fit site-specifically each window, and then inserted them and installed them inside.
It was such an incredible aha moment, and we were nervous about how it would actually look, because we had never done something like this before, because your works were on paper. And it turned out, I mean, it's in a way, it's like, it's so eye-catching. So when pedestrians are on the corridor of Lincoln Road, I mean, they see this image, something that they have never seen before. It's exciting to see that, and those 2 works there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the blue is sort of like,
incredible. Anastasia, tell us a little bit how you came up with the work. For this particular show, for Natural Transcendence. We can't hear you.
Here we go.
Oh, wow.
Thanks, Rhonda, for including my work in the show. It was certainly a collaboration, I feel like, with you. You gave me some ideas on how to transform my usual practice. always been sort of playing with video, but never fully incorporating it. So this was this like first foray after about a decade. I actually made a documentary film back in graduate school. And I'm so happy to be in this show with Antonia and Colleen, some of my favorite artists. So yeah, with this piece, it's called Dolphins in Venice, and it should come up at some point. It's the Reds. Okay, this is one of mine. Landscape Sublime is the series. And the Sublime here deals not only with the phenomenon of sort of overwhelming experience of nature that is so much grander, you know, in terms of its scale compared to humans, right? But the sublime, sort of the technological sublime, the sublime of the abundance of imagery of similar kind. I'm really exploring certain typologies of images. So with Dolphins in Venice, what inspired me actually, when you came up with the idea for this show, this was sort of winding down of COVID, but really did not want to talk about COVID anymore. I feel like so there's sort of the peak of oversaturation, and my work also deals with oversaturation of imagery, of our brains through imagery. And photography is really prone to repetition because it's so easily accessible, right? So the tropes keep repeating themselves. You know, first it borrowed from painting, and now it sort of keeps repeating the same motifs and compositions. So with Dolphins in Venice, I saw there was news about dolphins reappearing in Venice canal, and that was back in the fall, I think, when COVID closures were at their peak, and so there were significantly fewer tourists, and then dolphins reappeared in Venice, and it turned out to be fake news, but it was illustrated with stock images, you know, plucked from online stock image libraries. So there were never verified dolphins, and yet it gave people this hope, and this is something that I guess everybody was expecting. And then there were other news too, but that was accepted and shared widely. And then eventually, magically, I think a few months later, somebody actually documented dolphins going through Venice, through the canals. And so I was able to find some images, you know, there's like a news story about it.
There it is.
Yeah, and the project deals with these sort of narratives that are shaped in part through reportage photography, or photography that's borrowed to illustrate certain stories from stock libraries, and yet it serves as this like testimony to verify whatever facts want to be presented to the public. So it's sort of meta nature is what I'm addressing.
So Antonia already answered the second part of the question, which is the format, the process on how Antonia went from paper to vinyl on the windows. We have an interesting story because it started as a photograph also. And then we thought, well, it's how are we going to bring this to light? Because it's really more of a video show, but we loved your work so much. We wanted to see how it could work. And so then we created a digital image, right? And then you came up, there it is. And then tell us a little bit about the first video you made and the narrative you created from a still image.
Yeah, so the image, and there's actually an aspect of animation that's built into the process. I used to make those time-lapse images. So the photograph that you see is not a digital construction. It's an actual physical tableau that I built out of printouts in my studio. So it's this sort of theatrical set that I built element by element. So there's this process of actually constructing the set, which is animated. It's physically, it's literally me coming back and forth to the set and building those elements. So it's in essence animation. And I used to make some of those time lapses occasionally. I would just stitch photographs together. And with this one, I decided instead to sort of pan around this image and focus on certain elements of that, and to emphasize the constructedness and the artifice, which is really sort of this gestural metaphor for the artifice in photography, that everything, regardless of how realistic it looks, is a construct, right?
Right. And not only that, the size was manipulated, because we got to blow it up even more from the original size, which was really fun to see.
Yeah.
Excellent. And then, Colleen, we didn't talk about format, and that was quite a journey with your work, because Colleen, you have worked in video, and we worked actually together in video in the past. Colleen Plum is an artist represented by, coincidentally, my sister, Dina Mitrani Gallery, even though she's based out of New York, and she's always worked in nature, and I've always been in love with your work and how you see humans interacting with nature in this very whimsical way, how they tend to personify animals and nature. But in this case, you've done this before, but you had to recreate it for these particular images, right? So tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, it was, I guess, just the technical question of how to illuminate a photograph in a dark space. And I have, actually with these photographs that we're seeing, the light box, I've made light boxes for those.
Elephant.
The 30 times a minute project. So I've projected these elephant videos in the landscape and in cities, and it's an activist project where I talk to people about what captivity and the effects of captivity on elephants. And so for that project, I wanted to really address the light. And so that's where when I started thinking about, how should I exhibit these? So I created light boxes for those, when I installed the video, like some of those, there was one in Iceland or wherever I'm, I installed it in over 100 places. And it's really kind of obsessive, because the making of the video was really obsessive about getting as much evidence about the behavior that happens due to captivity. I know this is going off on another tangent, but anytime I can talk about my elephants. So they go mad in zoos, they lose their minds. Wouldn't we too? Which, okay, we are losing our minds, but can you imagine your whole life, they walk 50 miles a day. So they rock. So I made a video showing this behavior, and I went to 70 zoos and for 5 years. And so then that was my first time actually showing it, was at the screening room, was, and you helped so much. It was what do I do with this video? Because I have, days and days and days of footage of this behavior that is so sad, but then to weave it together, I made this video, and you helped so much, Rhonda, because it was a little bit longer, and you're your advice as an editor was brilliant. So to tighten it up. Anyway, so that was my first time showing it inside in the screening room, and I got to see how that was received, because I was so nervous. I mean, being a photographer, I didn't know how a video I didn't know people would laugh at me, or it was really scary. So I saw the guys when they came into the gallery to paint the rectangle. I watched them watch the video before the opening. And again, this is really hadn't been seen. And I watched them watch it and kind of calm down and just take it in. And then I thought, okay, this is going to be, people will watch it,
Good.
But anyway, so the video.
Hold on, Colleen is being humble. Colleen, you projected these videos all over the world on monuments, and you mentioned that before, but it really is quite an experience. And I'm going to actually interrupt even more for one moment. Anastasia, you've also projected. Have you done things on huge format on buildings? I've seen that, haven't I, or no? Am I making?
I have done physical photographs, prints,
but huge
on facades. Yeah.
Huge. Yeah, I just saw that recently.
The power of scale, right?
Oh my God.
I mean, the power of sort of injecting something. It's kind of like what Antonia's print is doing out on the front of the space. It interrupts people. You know, if you inject something into the public sphere where people aren't expecting it, they are surprised and they're like, what is that? And so what better way to communicate what I learned at all of these zoos, you know, than I would project it, and people would say, what are you doing? And then I photographed it. That was my whole point in bringing all that up, is how to get to the light boxes. After I projected them, I started photographing them, you know, how this onion of projects happened. So then the photographs became something I took seriously.
Yeah.
And then I made a book that just came out, 30 times a minute. And
those are Colleen's images. If you're
these
watching.
are the ones in the show. Yeah. So the light boxes were, you know, a sort of a transition or a step. You know, I learned about the power of making light box images, and so it was kind of a natural step to do the light boxes for this show. Yeah.
And what's great is all three. There's nothing like your work in the show. Like, all three are so unique, not just in content and message, but format. And I think that's what brings, I mean, even Wendy's installation and Adler's video, I mean, Megan and Jen, I mean, all together, it really came together so beautifully. Thank you so much. Okay, so we can go to our next question, which is, so you each mentioned this during your answer. I wanted you to talk a little bit about the different roles you play. So artist as poet, let's say, versus artist as documentarian, and artist as activist. I know you each have a lot to say about that. So we could start maybe with Antonia this time. I know you fit into all three of those categories.
Wow.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I guess I kind of started getting into more of activism. I read this book when I was in my early 20s by Howard Zinn called Artists in Times of War. And really the thesis of the book is that artists are citizens. So therefore we do have a platform to speak, you know, about different things. And from there, I really kind of went into it, and I've been working with the Lotus House Homeless Shelter for now 10 years. I'm on the board. And then from there, I joined the board of Planned Parenthood. I really think that work goes hand in hand. And God bless all the women in Texas today. But also, I'm on the board of Locust Projects. So I really think of this as social practice. All of this work I do advocating for women's rights is very much a part of my art practice. And then a lot of my work is very political, very research-based into structures of power and architectures of power. And I think it all ties in together. And then the poetry, I mean, I think that's sort of the foundation for everything. That's where it all started. And in poetry, I've kind of learned how to look and think. It's really about, the poetry I love is really about distilling the words down to the ones that are absolutely necessary, and kind of really thinking about images. And so I do that now, but thinking about it in terms of objects. So like trying to find objects that I think are metaphorical or representative of larger things. Like there's an image in here of the barricades, and I've been researching barricades for the last 5 years. I really think that they are symbolic of the culture and political nature of our streets today. You see them a lot in protests. They're very much used by police, and they're ubiquitous. They're totally everywhere, but you really don't notice them because they're designed to disappear into the landscape. But once you start noticing them, you'll really see them everywhere. So I really like the way that I think that the poetry sort of informed that way of me kind of looking at these barricades and kind of using them as an image to create a stronger statement.
I mean, that performance at Spinello's with your barricades is just like deafening. It's an incredible, it really impacts you, and you think about it for days after you experience the performance.
So that was a big departure, actually, because I was normally using my own body in a lot of these performance works. And then I created an environment where I created this machine that shot barricades, real police barricades. And then I fabricated an oversized barricade. So you had to sign a waiver, and then you entered into a pitch black gallery, and then you were in front of this enormous large barricade. And then the performance started, and this machine started shooting regular barricades at you. Very visceral, very loud. But it was a way to kind of use sculpture to create this empathetic response, like that I would normally have done with my own physical body, but creating an environment for the audience to feel it.
Excellent. Anastasia, you want to talk a little bit about that, your role as artist?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I guess I'm what are my goals? I'm a poet first, I think. Yeah, I process through my images. This is how I process information for myself. This is how I communicate information to others. This is photography for me very much is just a means of communication. And it's not sort of means to an end either, because I realized that digging up a bit of personal history, coming from former Soviet Union, propaganda was really strong. So I'm very averse to any sort of didactic message. That's why my work, even though it's documentary style, which is very accessible to a very wide audience, and it enables this kind of photography to travel far and wide under the, even under the title of like flood zone or environmental imagery. So it's published in magazines and newspapers, online articles, as illustrations to actual research, which I guess is my contribution to activism. And also because it's edition photography, it enables me to tangibly contribute to certain causes because I can donate those prints, and I regularly do, So they have, they have traveled in that sense as objects. And then I guess as somebody who's also like a non-native speaker, the choice of observational photography, which is fairly recent for me, it's only been 6 years actually since I moved to Miami that I took up observational photography. Before that, it was all studio constructs that you see in the show, which I feel like a bit more removed and abstract. But with observational photography in particular, it allows this sort of quick comprehension, and yet you realize you do need to pause and contemplate it longer. So it's sort of designed for slower unpacking, and the message is not the most obvious. I'm keeping it very open so that I can engage, again, this wider audience. So I'm not interested in sort of preaching to the choir.
Right.
It's meant to like make you pause and take it in and hopefully stir up the dialogue, which it does. So I guess in that sense, that's my activism.
I mean, your flood zone made you an official activist, environmentalist. I mean, your each photo, one is better than the other in terms of like how you really make the social commentary on how humans interact with nature. Very different from Colleen, but almost like a similar in what your message is you're saying as an environmentalist. Your talk with Dennis Scholl years back that I saw at Dot 51, I'm like, I have to meet her. She's brilliant. So I wish we had more time so we can dive into flood zone for a little bit, but we have to move on to Colleen because I know we're running out of time.
I love hearing, about both of you talk about your work. It's so interesting, and I'm with you, Anastasia, about the not trying to hit people over the head, like that. You hope people will see what you're getting at, like with my first series, which you see the flamingo and the bird hat, I included in here because they were, that first body of work was looking like sort of like, let's peel back the layer of how our animals in society or in our lives, are. And even the premise of that is like a human-centric perspective that I learned through doing the work. Like, I do this work and I keep getting deeper and deeper into the activism, because in doing the Animals Are Outside Today project, which was, again, that survey of like, people eat them and love them and wear them, and have artificial representation, animals are just everywhere. And that the project, that work, was like 12 years, taught me, gosh, the way that they're mostly, it's just exploiting them. I learned, I went to a fur shop, and it kind of politicized me in my eye as I went with the work. And it made me more and more kind of upset at how imbalanced it is. But so then it led to the elephant work, that project. And
right.
So it's like slow activism, but you wonder how much can photography or art even do. And I think, any bit matters. Anytime I talk with people, it can create some little shift, maybe, I hope. I think it does. I do. I think that people might not, even just seeing, Anastasia, these pictures, like, you look at it, and when I hear a little bit about it, it just like makes a person think differently, and that this picture is the flamingo. And so it's artificial. And, what is up with artificial? And then actually this bird hat picture is about the beginning of women were the beginning activists for the Audubon Society. Bird hats were, women in Boston, like, said, this is not cool, we're decimating populations of birds. And so they created societies to say no more bird hats, and they were the first activists again for birds. So that was really interesting to learn about that history. So I don't know, I'm really grateful to all the projects I do. Usually start with a curiosity, and then I get deeper and deeper, and then I get mad. I think and then I have to stop. No, never stop, but
Never stop. Never stop. Absolutely. Especially, it's actually what's beautiful about these conversations, and that this organically all came together, and that the three of you are all poets, documentarians, and activists, environmentalists, all in your own voices. And it's just, it's not in your face even when you first see the show, or I didn't even put it together until right now. And I feel really honored to be working with the three of you for the show. And with that, I want to ask one more quick question. What are you working on now? Because that's super exciting to hear about. Go for it. Whoever would like to talk. Colleen, go.
I'm working on as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm working on mining this archive of pictures and seeing what the series looks like, because, my older daughter, like being a sophomore at college and taking those last pictures of her, or when she's gardening, or, how that's to be continued, that these pictures are, I think they represent this bigger question. I hope, that's what I'm working on is editing and going through and, is it over now because they're moving out? My older daughter, no, I don't think so. I'm wondering, as I'm doing it, I'm thinking, I wish I did it even more consciously. This work of them we go camping and I photograph them, or so I'm wondering what the series will be tied with this work about trees. So I guess it's about this interconnectedness and communication, and that trees have, this other world of communication going on, and just as we do as humans. And so how can those two projects maybe align? So it's kind of fun to be starting with that and going through them and figuring out if the tree pictures fit. So it's really exciting. And I keep making videos all the time. So that's an ongoing process. And I have in the background this sycamore project. I've collected sycamore skins that I'm making a sculpture out of.
Okay.
Yeah. Sycamores, by the way, are the oldest and hardiest street tree. So, like it's hopefully, it's about hope of survival.
I have to tell you, we looked at so many trees when we were deciding on what images to go for this show. I mean, so many trees that I think something changed within me, because all of a sudden I started noticing like every single little tree walking in the street or wherever I travel to. And they're like people to me now. Like I look at them, I talk to them. They're like, they have such personality.
Yeah.
There's so much in trees. And I think that was initiated with our personal process. Antonia, tell us what you're working on.
Ooh, well, thanks to the Ellie grant from Oolite Arts, I am now converting a cement truck into a music instrument that plays the song Young, Latin, and Proud in collaboration with the musician Helado Negro. So I'm now the proud owner of a cement truck, and we were in the process of scoring it, which is very exciting. A little bit about the project. I've sort of been noticing that there's sort of this nationalism on the rise. And in addition to that, this sort of anti-Latinx, anti-immigrant rhetoric and policies, especially immigration policies. So I was thinking about also this research I do on protest, which the Barricade Project is a part of. But thinking about like the materiality of protest, like what are we standing on? And I was like, we're standing on concrete. And I was like, well, who would maybe have made that floor or that sidewalk, And I'm like, I bet you it's an immigrant. It's the same people we're trying to exclude from this country. Who's building the wall? The same people dying trying to cross the wall. Right. So it's about kind of talking about all this invisible labor that's getting poured into our societies. And the truck will play the song Young, Latin, and Proud. And it's very much like a protest, but it's also in celebration of the brown body in public space.
I love that.
And it's going to debut in October, so I'll let you know.
Is there salsa in the composition?
There's no salsa in the composition. Helado Negro's work
I'm from a Cuban myself.
You can salsa, Rhonda. If you want a salsa, you can totally salsa.
Anastasia, tell us a little bit about what you're working on now.
So interesting to hear from both of you. Actually, some parallels with Antonia's project, the LE granted one. When I was photographing for the flood zone, which is the project that was most recently published, I kept stumbling upon, and I traveled not just in Florida, but also to Georgia and South Carolina. And I kept coming across ruins of various kinds, right, from like hurricane destruction to much older ones of like sugar plantations. And so I dug up some history, and it's pretty, it's pretty dark. So looking into this sort of wider picture of not only exploited land, right, and haphazardly developed with that concrete poured over, right, and then history of exploited labor and how they're intertwined, the whole exploitation of resources for maximum gain, right, the quickest and maximum gain. So the underpinnings of that, and how can you address that, in this current moment, just how can you visualize that history through some maybe remnants, and photography, fortunately and unfortunately intertwined with this, with time, right? It's a timestamp medium. So what best to then document the layers of that history than photography? And that's my my next project, and it's called the Atlantic Coast. So I'm traveling up the coast and I'm photographing things, but it's going to be a big archive before I determine what can actually stay. And then flood zone is an ongoing project, so it just morphs into these other things like the Atlantic coast, and then it's going to be a video of appropriated footage of different floods from all over the world. Yeah, and then there's another one that's Fire Zone, which is a telling title, but also trying not to go full doom and gloom with those, but present a somewhat objective, detached sort of documentation.
It's called Fire Zones.
Yeah, there's Fire Zone, and then there's the Atlantic coast, and then I keep building my tableaus when it's too hot outside. And
So it sounds like you are each working on very poignant projects right now. Our current state of political affairs with immigration, diving into history, and Colleen, I can very much relate to your quiet observation of your children as they grow, and how quickly time passes, and very poetic. As you can see, you each work in so many different aspects. You incorporate so many themes into your work. It's not only nature. So I wanted to ask you one more question on how each of you turned to nature in the first place. Like, what was your inspiration for turning to nature when you first, like, go way back when you first began practicing and you picked up your camera or your video camera? What turned you on to nature at the very beginning? Colleen, you want to start?
Sure. I was, when I was, I mean, how far back? It's like, I think I grew up in Chicago in Rogers Park, which is really urban. So I think, and my dad, I think, was really attuned to like taking us out into the landscape. Like, I don't know, we go camping, and he appreciated mountains and stuff. So I think that planted the seed, and for paying attention, maybe, I don't know, or maybe I just always wanted to pay attention. I was curious about, like kids are, bugs and trees, and we were always outside. And so then in grad school, I didn't know what to do. I was a graphic designer. And then I went back to grad school because I loved photography, and was kind of in a crisis, just like, I can't keep doing graphic design. I'm an artist, and I had to get out of my cubicle and the business world. And I mean, I love graphic design, but when I was in grad school, it happened so accidentally and naturally, because I think of what I was drawn to was kind of the like presence of nature as a comfort, or of presence. I was working in black and white, and I would find just representations of nature, and how fascinating it was that we decorate our lives, I guess, in a city with nature, fake or whatever. And so then it kind of came through during critiques. It was like all these animals and kind of bizarre, like things that don't line up. Why is this here? And once I realized what I was doing, what I was drawn to, then I started doing it on purpose and started investigating. And that's where it all began. It was like this fire was lit, and I started working in color, and it was like, well, this is some project. And I haven't stopped, I guess, looking at that and wondering why, and what is it that maybe, what sort of instinct is that we have as people to connect with nature, with animals, with things beyond ourselves. And is it instinct? Is it lack? Is it urban? So that question is unanswerable, but that it's gone, I think then my work has gone where it's so haywire. This desire to have nature is a colonial concept that has it's a beautiful idea to connect and want and be so fascinated with whatever this exotic, but it's always at the nature's expense, animals' expense, or the land, or we're just we're like this. So I wonder when it's going to shift. I think we're going to have no choice And we're going to have to go back to symbiosis and thinking about, you know, how does that's a big topic right there, but we're going to get there. So
I think you're brilliant in how you tuned into a concept or a theme that we all think about in our quiet moments. Not all, you know, but so many of us do. But you capture it so beautifully and poetically in your photographs. And like Anastasia said in her work, it's like it's great that it's not like in your face, it's not didactic. It's just you allow for it to, like, the layers, you see it, you see one of your images, and then it's the layers start to peel off. It's almost like a slow unraveling of what you're trying to tell us. It's really beautiful on how you capture a moment between how we interact with animals and nature. And so it's really great to hear how you had your aha moment during your thesis. It's great. Anastasia, when did you first turn to nature? I mean, don't get me started on flood zone, because it's like, wow, but you know, it's just, let's go maybe back a little further. I know we're running out of time, but.
I'll be quick. I studied environmental design. Back in Moscow, I was always preoccupied with places, with how places shape who we are, with how places are shaped by images of those places, you know, and again, growing up in very image heavy culture, and then long journey through Midwest, and then New England and into Miami. I feel like Miami was just the perfect embodiment of everything I was thinking about, because it's so dependent on its own image. So I was always interested in nature as this sort of construct, right? And like Colleen said, this whole premise of the control of nature, right? We come and we take over. So these little hubs of like controlled nature. Well, in Miami, you certainly feel out of control. You know, I moved here, and then 2016 was the first hurricane, 2017. And I found it so refreshing, because I've always lived in large cities, you know, it's Moscow. And then you feel like this is not a threat. Urban geography is not going to take over your life. But in Miami, it's very different, right? So the whole preparations for hurricanes. So all of these concepts of the sublime and my environmental design, they came together in this place and made me really sort of reevaluate my delivery of my thinking through visual form. So I took up observational photography when I moved here.
I thought it was great. I was like, wow, it took somebody not from Miami to come to Miami and peel off the layers of Miami and have us see things that Miamians don't normally notice. I thought it was brilliant, all of your images. And Antonia, tell us when you began. First of all, your videos I've always loved, and this is a lens-based show. I feel like I need to bring up video as well. We've been talking so much about photographs, but if you all have a chance to see Antonia's videos as well, the bees, I can, go on and on, but go to our website, all of their websites. Go ahead and tell us when you began to turn to nature. We could talk about the bees, actually.
I can talk about the bees, but I'll be quick. So yeah, I grew up in Miami, and when I was like 14, my uncle moved to Boulder, Colorado, and I went out there and visited him, and I was just blown away. I'd never seen mountains so big before. And he and I had this pact that we would try to hike as many 13,000 foot mountains as we could. And then I went out there every single summer, and all we did was hike all these mountains. And it was like, something started happening when I was hiking. I just started writing poetry in my head, just like the quietness and the repetition, and like, that was it. And I was just sort of hooked on that experience. And I grew up in a really Catholic church, like through everything. And after that, I told my parents I wasn't Catholic anymore, and I kept hiking and camping. They really loved that, by the way. And then like, yeah, I just wanted as much of it as I could. But I think that there is this idea of like nature that you have to have access. Like right now I'm in Vermont or in Colorado, but I've always been a long distance runner, and I kind of get that same feeling just like running. I come up with a lot of ideas and insight.
I think it's great just to mention on your work how your work, I believe, is one of the only pieces in the show. Is the only piece where you are the artist as participant. You physically immerse yourself in nature and then capture the image, as opposed to Colleen and Anastasia, who are silent observers or creating collages. You are the performer, which I just wanted to note. So if anybody hasn't seen the show yet, they'll understand the background of that image, of that photogram, which you explained so beautifully at the beginning of this talk. I think we're running out of time, right? I see Danielle.
I'm sorry. I'm the person here to tell us that we're officially out of time. Maybe as a nice way to wrap it up, each of us can go around and say one place that we enjoy being in nature, whether it be at home or somewhere else. Then we can wrap up. Maybe start with Anastasia. Your
Definitely
favorite
not at home. After this year, it is not home that I enjoy being. I love my home, but I'd rather be anywhere else traveling right now. I cannot wait.
Yeah.
Point. Rhonda?
I still love the beach. I still love sitting by the water and swimming as much as I can. I mean, that's my favorite, my happy place.
Colleen?
I will echo Rhonda. I live right near the Lake Michigan, so I walk my dog every day, and it's a must-see new show every day, how the lake looks and what it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful. Antonia?
I would say, apart from the mountains, maybe like scuba diving. Whenever you jump in the water, you realize what a crazy planet this is. Every time the floor just looks like you're, in space.
Beautiful. I am very scared of the ocean, so I don't know that feeling. I'm the type of person that wears flip-flops into the ocean just so that I don't touch something.
Wow. Yeah.
You live in Miami?
I know. I do that. Love nature, but scared of the ocean. I think it's an actual phobia. But anywho, thank you all so much for being here tonight. Lovely discussion. For anyone that has not visited the show already, it's up till November 7th. Please feel free to stop by. I believe it's open every single day of the week. So come on by and see it before it closes up. And thank you all for the lovely conversation. And we're officially letting you go and enjoy your home life now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
Bye, Antonia. Bye, Anastasia.
Thank you. Bye, Anastasia. Bye,
Thanks,
Colleen.
everybody.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.